Good evening, and welcome to the New York Immigration Coalition's Road to Recovery video series. My name is Nora Melendez, and I am the Immigrant Services Support Senior Events Associate, and I will be your host. The NYIC has put together a series of videos to share information and resources regarding economic recovery and resilience, remote learning, and social services to equip immigrant New Yorkers facing the challenges of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we'll be joined by Charlie Driver, a Community Affairs Associate at the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. We will cover the rights, resources, and services available to workers in New York City, from the paid, safe, and sick leave law to the fair work week laws. We will break down the resources and services available and the rights you have as a worker in New York City. Please remember, this is a public space. We want to make sure it's as safe as possible for everyone, so please refrain from sharing personal information. If you're seeking additional support, our contact information has been pinned in the comment section below. If you are based in New York City seeking legal assistance and would like to speak with an immigration lawyer, please fill out the referral form also pinned in the comment section. To start, I'd like to thank the New York City Council and the Department of Youth and Community Services for sponsoring this Road to Recovery event. We appreciate your ongoing support. Now, please help me welcome Charlie.
Hi, Nora. Thanks for having me and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, can you tell us a bit more about the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection and the work you do?
Yeah, I think that's a very natural way to start. So we sort of do a lot, but basically the core of our work is what's in our name, the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. So we protect and we enhance the daily economic lives of New Yorkers to create thriving communities. And sort of the consumer protection side of that includes us licensing more than 59,000 businesses in more than 50 industries in New York City, and also enforcing key consumer protection, licensing, and workplace laws that apply to countless more. We'll talk about a lot of that today. It's basically everything from seeing a price tag or a price on everything that you see in a shop to just making sure that you get your paycheck, you get paid fairly at the end of a day of work. And so I'm personally part of our community affairs team in DCWP. As part of that team, my role is reaching out to people, businesses, community organizations like NYIC and elected officials to make sure that they know the rights and resources we provide and that the city is able to serve the people who are most in need. And then within sort of the big umbrella of DCWP, we have a specific office called the Office of Labor Policy and Standards that you'll hear me talk a lot about tonight, but that's the central resource for workers. So it's a dedicated voice in city government, advocating for, supporting, protecting workers in New York City. And the way they do that is by enforcing worker protection laws, promoting labor standards and policies that create fair workplaces, and just generally ensuring that all workers can realize their rights, regardless of their immigration status or what their situation is.
So as a worker in New York City, what are my rights?
It's a great question. So there are many sort of rights that apply, and I'll take a moment now to highlight specifically the key workplace laws and rules that are enforced by the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. So the big one that I'm going to talk about hopefully a little later is the paid, safe, and sick leave. So basically that's a law that means that employees can use sick leaves for themselves or for a family member for diagnosis, care, or treatment of an illness, injury, or health condition, or for preventative medical care. So that includes, say, if myself or one of my loved ones came down with COVID-19 and I need to take some time off of work to care for them, that law makes sure that I'm able to do that and get paid to do it. And so the top complaints that we receive on paid, safe, and sick leave are retaliation. So a lot of the times employers don't know about this law, and we make sure that if they're trying to deny someone their rights, we provide legal support to make sure that from the city's perspective, we make them pay up. Another one is the idea of a fair work week. So that's applying specifically to fast food and retail employers, and it's making sure that they have the right to see their work schedules in advance, be aware of schedule changes, sort of things like that. And then there's a third major law called the Freelance Isn't Free Act, which is for people who don't have one full-time job or a few part-time jobs, but are working contract to contract, agreement to agreement on different projects. And it makes sure that contracts are given in writing, pay is provided on time, pay is received in complete as well. So those are sort of three major ones that we enforce. And I can also say for any of these, or if you feel just your rights are being infringed on generally, OLPS, that Office of Labor Policy and Standards, is the place to go. And at the end of the presentation, we'll give out some information on how you can get in touch with them.
Yes, and their contact information has been pinned in the comment section as well, if anyone needs to see that. So then following up with that, are my rights impacted by my immigration status?
No, your rights are not impacted by your immigration status at all. The only thing that really matters is whether you're a worker in New York City. So if, let's say you live in New York City and you're commuting out to Westchester or New Jersey, the laws that we're talking about that are passed specifically by the city won't apply to you. But no matter who you are, no matter your immigration status, if you're a worker in New York City, you're covered by DCWP.
So, but do my rights change depending on the sector I work in?
Yeah, so in that case, yes, there are certain variations. Some of our laws apply to some sectors, but not to others. But I can't get into sort of all of that right now. But one thing that I will, let me share my screen to sort of demonstrate. We have a workers page on our website. So if you go to nyc.gov/DCA and then click on the workers tab, you'll then be able to click on workers' rights. And in here, we have at the bottom a sort of list of pretty much every single right that we enforce, and some that the state and federal government enforce. But we also have some specific ones that come up in blue here that are specific to different industries. So there are specific rights relating to the apparel industry, to building service workers, so people who work in construction or service buildings. Domestic workers is a big one. We even have a full domestic workers bill of rights that you can find on this website. So if you're employed by a household and work as a nanny, cleaner, home health aide, there's a specific set of rights that apply to you. Fast food workers, government contract work, grocery workers, people under the age of 18, nail salon workers, tipped workers. So that's sort of a long way of demonstrating that, yes, depending on the sector that you work in, your rights do change, but we're here to sort of help you and help you parse all of that complicated information. And it's all here on our website on this worker rights subsection. And I believe that's been linked in the chat. So if you click on that, you can take a look at it in more depth a little later on.
Definitely. We want to make sure we're directing everyone to the right sources to find out what their rights are. So please check out that link below if you have any questions about what your rights are depending on the sector you work in. So touching on the Fair Work Week law, which you mentioned quite a bit, what does it mean and who is protected by this law?
Sure. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now just not to confuse anyone. The Fair Work Week law is geared specifically toward people who work in fast food and people who work in retail. So anything from McDonald's to a clothing shop or pretty much any shop you go in. So, and it gives those workers the right to a predictable, fair schedule. What does that mean? That includes, say, estimates of work schedules. So when I first get my job working for a fast food company, that restaurant will tell me, this is what we're expecting you to work. So we're probably going to ask you to work, 4 night shifts a week, for example. And then before I start working, before my first day, also in addition, a first work schedule in writing. So I don't show up on the first day and be told, oh, well, you're going to work these hours. Even if it doesn't work for me, I want to have a chance to sort of be able to have a conversation about whether the job schedule is right for me, whether it works with my needs. That's what that's there for. Also in that vein, then, companies need to give you 2 weeks advance notice of your working schedule. And if they're giving you a schedule change with less than 2 weeks notice, or asking you to work a shift with 2 weeks notice, you're actually entitled to premium pay for that inconvenience. So there should be no surprises from your employer if you're in fast food or retail as to the schedule that you're going to be working next week or the week after. And then another really important thing that this law protects against is people being asked to work the really demanding clopening shifts, which is a fun sort of merger of closing and opening. And that's exactly what a clopening shift is. It's if I'm asked to work and close up, 9, 10, 11 p.m. One night, and then asked to come in at 7 the next day for an opening up. So you have to give your consent to work those shifts. You can't be forced to work those shifts without saying that you're willing to do it. And for being asked to work that shifts, you're entitled to a specific premium. And we dropped a link in the chat to a page talking more about that. So you can find out what exactly the premium is that you're entitled to, and a little more detail about those if they're sort of relevant to you in your current position. So that's a sort of broad overview of that specific law.
That's incredible and very exciting to know. So we've also recently been hearing a lot about the New York City paid safe and sick leave law. What does that mean for workers?
Yeah, the paid safe and sick leave law is one of my favorites. I think it's one of the most important things that we do as an advocate for workers for the city government. So the paid safe and sick leave law means that no worker should have to work sick. And that's especially important in the midst of a global pandemic. So if you tested positive for COVID-19, if you've been in contact with someone who tested positive, you have sick leave available to you. And then more generally, even beyond the pandemic, it means that you don't need to go to work if you're sick, and your employer should, in almost all cases, pay you for the time that you take off while you're sick. So there's specifically New York City's paid safe and sick leave law, which I'm going to talk to right now, but I do also want to flag that I'll also be talking about a New York State specific sick leave law. So I'll differentiate clearly between the two. But for New York City's paid safe and sick leave law, that exists and it applies no matter what's going on, whether there's a pandemic or there's not. It means that employers must provide domestic workers with 40 hours of paid safe and sick leave, as well as other workers. So people who work for an employer with 100 or more employees in New York City, they must be provided with up to 56 hours of paid leave each calendar year. So that's whether you go to the doctor or get a surgery or take care of your kid if they're home from school sick. You're entitled to up to 56 hours of paid leave for that. And then if your employer has 4 or fewer employees and a net income of $1 million or more, you must receive paid leave of up to 40 hours. And if it's under 100 employees and an income of less than 1 million, under 4 or fewer employees and a net income of less than $1 million, you get 40 hours of unpaid leave through your work. And so there's a few other sort of side notes to that. This leave starts accumulating as soon as you start working. So as soon as I start working in my local supermarket, for each 36 hours that I work, I will accrue 1 hour of paid sick leave. And that continues until I hit the limit in a given year. And I can use that sick leave straight away. So once I hit that period and get my 1 hour of sick leave and I need to go to the doctor for an hour, my employer is going to pay me for that time that I have to take off. Now that employer can ask me for documentation in certain cases, and that's something they have the rights to do, and I can provide documentation, a doctor's note, some sort of evidence. So that's an important thing. Another important thing is that my employer, my boss, needs to tell me when I actually accrue that time. So on your pay stub or however you're paid, you should also receive a document with a clear indication of how much time I've gained in a given year, how much time I've used, and how much total leave I have. So I'm aware of the time that I have off. So that's the New York City paid safe and sick leave law. And that, as I said, will continue to exist after we exit the pandemic. After COVID-19 is something, we're telling our kids about, we will still be entitled to paid safe and sick leave. And I encourage everyone to go to the webpage that we've posted in the chat and it's being displayed here, just to sort of dig into this in a little more depth, because I know this is very confusing and can be kind of complicated. But there's some great fact sheets on there that will explain this in a much maybe clearer way than I will from just talking. And I want to, Nora, also now take a moment to mention the other sick leave that's available to people right now, and that's the New York State sick leave law. So that's a little different. This is specifically a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and applies specifically based on if you become sick with COVID-19, if your loved one becomes sick with COVID-19, or if you are required to quarantine. So that could even apply if school or childcare or business of a loved one is closed as a result of COVID-19. You're entitled to a certain amount of paid sick leave. So you should take a look at that link that was just posted. That will tell you the exact amount of leave that you're entitled to. It depends on the size of the employer and the nature of your employer. But what you can do is, in the case of becoming sick with COVID-19 or having a family member sick or quarantined with COVID, you can get what's called basically a declaration of quarantine, a certificate of quarantine from New York State, and you'll then be able to show that to your employer, and they have to give you paid time if you are covered by the law for the time that you're going to be off work. So there's no reason to come into work if you have COVID-19. Not only is it a terrible idea for you and everyone else, but also the law is protecting you from having to be in that situation and having to choose between your health, your loved one's health, or sort of the money that you need to earn to keep food on the table.
Definitely. We want to echo that there are resources and services in place for everyone to stay safe, regardless of what their situation might be. So just to continue on that, what is the difference between paid safe and paid sick leave?
Yeah, that's another great question. So paid safe leave is something that is also covered by the time that you'll earn for that paid sick leave that we just talked about. And what that basically means is that when you need time off work for safety-related reasons, you can take that. So paid safe leave is time that you need to take to seek assistance or to take other safety measures if you or a family member is the victim of any act or threat of domestic violence, unwanted sexual contact, stalking, or human trafficking. If you feel like you're in danger, you're entitled to the time that you need under this law to get the help that you need. And that time will be paid up to the limit that I discussed earlier. So that's 56 hours in the event that your employer has over 100 employees, and 40 if your employer is under that level. And then just to reiterate in terms of the distinction with paid sick leave applies to you or a family member too. So don't think just about your needs here. These are resources that apply both to you and to your loved ones. And we take a broad definition of family here. So it's anyone who has a family-like relationship. So if you live in a multi-generational household, or if you live with someone that you call an uncle who isn't necessarily your uncle, but it's like family, you're going to be covered by that law if you need to care for them, whether they're in danger or whether they're sick.
I love that. So how can I determine if I'm covered by the law? Because you mentioned there are a lot of different subjective measures. So how do I know?
Sure. So the basic rule of thumb here is that if you're a domestic worker, or if you work at any business or nonprofit in New York City, then you're covered by New York City's paid safe and sick leave law. And again, it sort of varies in the amount of hours that you'll get based on the size, but your employer has to tell you that. So you shouldn't have to worry about that at all. For New York State, again, that law relates more specifically to COVID, and it applies to any worker who has been ordered to quarantine. In terms of the exceptions to the paid safe and sick leave law from the city, because there are some, basically, if you're not in that category that I spoke about, which is domestic worker or worker at any business or nonprofit. So if you're like me and you work for the government, or if you work in certain educational fields, then there's a little more gray areas, but we're here to help you navigate that. So again, at the end of the presentation, when we give out information about how to contact the Office of Labor and Policy Standards, you can call them at 311 or send them an email on the email address we'll post in the chat, and they can help you navigate figuring out whether this applies to you.
Yeah, definitely. And like on that question of asking for help, one thing that we hear a lot about are scams and frauds that people fall victim to when seeking additional support. So what are some signs that community members should be aware of when seeking additional support?
Yeah, so especially with the pandemic, we've seen an increase in people being taken advantage of, because it's been a time when so many of us have been in desperate circumstances and in great need and more vulnerable than previous. So one of the biggest scams that we've been seeing, and one that's affected us really closely as government, is scammers who are pretending to be from government. So throughout the pandemic, scammers have been pretending to be from the Internal Revenue Service or from an unemployment agency, saying things like they can help you get your stimulus payment from the federal government, or they can help you get a larger tax return, or when it comes to unemployment, they can help you get faster unemployment benefits, get bigger unemployment benefits. And so when that happens, they'll usually, sometimes they can sound really convincing. They'll start with a phone call or an email or a text message saying they're with a government agency, or giving you a fake employee ID number and maybe naming one or two pieces of personal information about you just to sort of get you hooked. The best way to sort of avoid that is, one, just always be skeptical of anyone who's reaching out to you and asking you for money or asking you for your personal information. In terms of the government, I mean, we should be able to verify your information. So if someone's reaching out about your taxes, you can ask them to verify certain things about you. So maybe that's like some personal information, or like an address is a great way to start if they haven't provided that already. If they're talking about the unemployment case that you filed, asking them to confirm your case number, or confirm like your employee ID, some information that you gave when you made that initial unemployment claim, is a great way to sort of catch them on the back foot and make them either hang up or sort of make it very clear that they don't know what they're talking about. But more generally, just being cautious. And if it is really the government and the IRS is reaching out to you and they're saying you owe money on your taxes, if you're skeptical about that first letter that you receive, because it'll usually be a letter, wait, and they'll try and contact you another way. The government knows how to get in touch with you better than these scammers. And so I just want to also highlight, then, having talked about these government scams, which we've seen a lot of, some other common scam types that people should be aware of. So one is sort of another government-related one, which is license or permit renewal. Let's say that you work in street vending and you want to get a permit, or you have a permit from the city. Someone contacts you saying, oh, I can get you a permit for half the price or in half the time. That's probably a scam. Where the government, we're not big into sort of case-by-case exceptions. Generally, we hold tight to the rules that we establish. There's also then employment agencies, so people who are pretending to be from an employment agency and offering you a job and saying that you have to quit your job or give personal information to sort of get that. If someone's calling out of the blue, offering a job that you've never heard from before, generally that's a time to be a little wary. It's also debt relief. I know that a lot of people are in financial need right now, but if someone's calling you and saying, I can get you, I can get your debt cut in half if you give me like either personal information or payment information, that rarely happens. And if it happens, it'll usually be coming from a verified source. And then one final one is just charity scams. So if you're asked to give charity to someone, either it's on the internet or someone hands you a piece of paper and says like, I have this problem, or like, have you heard about this family that's really in great need? Just be careful. You can usually find corroborating information, or like check that a lot of people who've donated to something before if you're going to donate to a GoFundMe or another website. And again, at the end of the day, this all comes back to just being as careful as possible. Don't rush into any decisions where you're going to give your money to someone who you've just met, or who you haven't met in person or have spoken to on the phone.
Definitely, public benefits aren't sold, and we want to make sure that people are going to the right sources to find the help they need. So especially if you're looking at government agencies and you're online, it should end in .gov. It shouldn't end in .com or .org or anything else like that. So little things to keep in mind also when you're seeking help as well.
Yeah, and also sorry to interrupt. Also misspelling. A lot of people will maybe if they want to copy a website address, they'll switch a couple letters, or their email will misspell the name of the agency. That's a common mistake that they make. So that's another area where keep an eye out.
Yes, and you can see that. If you don't look closely enough, you might miss it. But it's really important to double check and do your due diligence and really follow up before you share anything with anyone. So definitely want to echo that. Moving into where should community members go if they have more questions? So what are some sources that they can follow up with directly after this?
Yeah, so a great way to start is looking through in a little more depth the links that we posted in the chat. So if there's one that applies to you specifically, or there's one that you maybe were confused by what I had to say, or you want to find out more about that, go back, take a look at those links, take a look at our website. We have a lot of resources that are available for everyone, and that might either save you some money or make you some money down the line. So definitely take a look at our website. Another thing you can do, is just reach out to the agency. We're here to help. We are here to protect you, to empower you. So you can, I think we're going to drop my personal contact information in this talk. If you are not a native English speaker or you have any language needs, you can always call 311, which is the city's phone number. We have basically every language under the sun is available over that phone line, and you can get translation help, and someone will be there to help answer the questions that you may have. And then I think we should also drop some other areas. So there's the OLPS, which is the Office of Labor Policy and Standards that I've been talking about so much. So that's your resource if you think that you've been denied pay that you should have gotten, if you haven't been able to take sick leave that you now believe you're entitled to. Those are the people you should go to. And so they are, sorry, I'm just trying to type while I'm saying this. So one way to get them is calling 311. And the other is, I can actually put up their email here. I'm going to share my screen for a sec.
Of course. We've also put all of this contact information as a pinned comment. So keep your eyes on that comment section. There will be a pinned comment with all of this as well.
Yeah, so if you look at this email at the bottom here of my screen, olps@dca.nyc.gov, you can send to that email any questions that you have about labor laws, workplace protection laws, paid safe and sick, and someone from our team will get back to you about those needs. So that's really a great resource. And if you have any consumer rights questions as well, you can go to our website in the consumers area, and there are resources there as well.
Great. So now we're actually going to open it up for questions from the audience. As a reminder, this is a public space. We want to make sure it's as safe as possible for everyone. So please refrain from sharing personal information. Our contact information has been pinned in the comment section below. So feel free to reach out directly if you have a personal question that you need us to follow up on a little bit more. So our first question here is, are all restaurant workers covered by the Fair Workweek law, or is it limited to fast food workers?
Sure, that's a good question. So in terms of where we're at now with the Fair Workweek law, it is limited to fast food workers specifically. And if we're talking about, well, Charlie, what is a fast food worker? A good rule of thumb for what is versus isn't a fast food worker is basically someone, if the restaurant is employing wait staff, so a waiter of some capacity, it's probably not fast food. And a very common, type of fast food is any sort of chain. So if there are multiple locations, you go in, you can get it on a lunch very quickly. That's going to be a fast food restaurant.
Okay, and then a follow-up question is, are day laborers protected by NYC's Freelance Isn't Free Act? And if so, how is this enforced?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'm not 100% sure on this, so we're going to confirm what I'm going to say. But I believe that day laborers are covered by that. I think they qualify as freelancers because they are taking, part-time work. Well, not part-time work. They're basically provided by serving as an independent contractor to do a specific job. There's no benefits involved. It's not a lasting commitment. So they are covered. One thing, if a day laborer is being paid then more than $800 for that day of labor or a specific, period of time for work, then they're covered more specifically by the law and required to have written contracts, things like that. But either way, day laborers are entitled to, being paid within 30 days, having everything followed through with. And if you want to find more information about that, you can go on our website to the Freelance Workers tab, which I think we can drop in the chat. And that has information about each facet of that law, each part of that law, as well as a link to where you can actually file a complaint if you feel like your rights have been infringed on by someone who's employed you as a day laborer.
Okay, and if I want to file a complaint, how long does that take to get processed?
Sure. So that varies. We will get back to you in a matter of days. That's an internal policy in terms of the processing of a complaint. I don't think there's a real clear answer I can give you in terms of how long it takes, because some vary sort of in duration. Some things take longer than others. But we are committed to getting you responses as quickly as possible, being open about the time that it's going to take, especially with 311. We'll always tell you the amount of time in which you should expect to hear from us.
Awesome. And what information is collected when filing a complaint?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think it's anything more than sort of the location of the complaint and information. You can file these complaints anonymously as needed, but also when you're reaching out to us for workplace complaints, usually that needs to be in your name. If you provide your name to us for a workplace complaint, we will not open you up to retaliation by sharing it. We have gone to court as an agency to defend our right to not give up that information. So we're really committed to, making a safe area to make sure that people can complain as freely as possible.
It's great to know. And how does an anonymous complaint work?
An anonymous complaint, you will get a complaint number, and I believe you will be able to then keep that complaint number on you and look up the status of that complaint. So that's a way to check in on it. Obviously, we can't reach out to you to tell you what's happening with that, but I think with the complaint number, you'll be able to check in.
Okay, and what happens if I've used up all my paid sick leave, but am still unable to return to work?
Sure, so then when you've used up all your paid sick leave, if you're still unable to return to work, you can start thinking about an unpaid leave of absence. Just talk to your employer, let them know how much time that you need, whether that's you taking another 2 sick days and just not getting paid for them, or having to do something longer. That's an area where you can talk with your employer, talk about your needs, talk about their needs, and figure out, a compromise that works for both of you. And I encourage you, as you can, don't go into work sick. It's only usually going to make things worse for your health and potentially for your coworkers.
And can I be fired if I'm unable to return to work?
Michelle, my coworker, will check on that. I believe there is a capacity for an employer to lay you off after that, but I'm going to check on that.
No worries. We will definitely keep all the information updated in the comment section, so please keep your eyes on that. If anyone has any other last-minute questions, please drop them in the comment section now as we start to wind down. Okay. And then one last question is, what is the definition of retaliation? So how do I know if it's done in retaliation?
Sure. Generally, if it's done in retaliation, you'll probably have a strong feeling that it's done in retaliation. So if there's a moment where you say to your boss, well, I'm entitled to this paid sick leave, you have to give it to me, this is the law, and show them what the law is, and they give you that paid sick leave, and you find out next week when you come back to work after taking care of your kid when they're home from school that your hours have been reduced, or you are, getting your pay reduced or something like that, some sort of negative thing. Or if it's not even quantifiable, if you're getting an unsafe work environment that you can demonstrate, that's an area where it's retaliation. To give sort of the less exciting legal definition, retaliation can include any threat, discipline, discharge, which means, sort of being fired, demotion, suspension, reduction in your hours, or anything that's an adverse employment action against you that's coming after you've attempted to exercise or attempt to exercise, one of your rights under the law. Paid sick leave specifically calls out retaliation, means you can't be retaliated again for doing that.
Awesome. So that is all the time we have today. If anyone has any additional questions or personal questions they want to follow up with, please follow up at our contact information, which, as we've mentioned, is pinned in the comment section. I do want to make some space for you, Charlie, to highlight any other resources that you wanted to share from DCWP.
Sure. I'm going to go back to sort of that PowerPoint I was sharing to just highlight one more resource that we have, which is the City of New York and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection provides free financial counseling. So if you have questions about debt that you have, about whether you should go into a new job or take the plunge to start your own business, any sort of thing that has to do with your money, your financial situation, we have trained coaches that we work with who are available to you free of charge and can help you work through your financial crisis or planning for your future or thinking about retirement funds, anything under the sun relating to the money in your pocket. You can go to nyc.gov/talkmoney to to make a secure, confidential appointment today. That can be in person, it can be virtual, it can be over the phone. It's a really great resource that a lot of people don't know about. And you don't need to pay money for a financial coach. You don't need to pay money to sort of get someone to give you this advice. You can get it for free through the city. So be sure to check that out at nyc.gov/talkmoney, or you can also, if you don't have access to that website for whatever reason, you can also call 311 and make an appointment that way.
Yes, and we want to like reinforce that you don't have to only talk to someone when you're in crisis. Like it's good to go and talk to someone when you want to prepare, or there's a major life change, you've started a new job, there's a change in your income. Those are all great times also to talk to someone. I know it's been really helpful for a lot of the communities we serve, so hopefully people get in touch. It's a wonderful resource, so thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you again for joining us today, and thank you everyone for tuning in. To learn more about the various programs and resources available in New York City, check out our Road to Recovery playlist on our YouTube channel. To learn more or stay involved with the New York Immigration Coalition and the Department of Consumer Worker Protection, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and all the other places. The websites are linked on the screen, as well as our COVID-19 resources directory guide. And if you need to speak with an immigration lawyer and would like to follow up with a consultation, the form has been pinned in the comments section as well. Stay safe, take care, and enjoy your evening, everyone. Bye.